The theme for the afternoon talk is, what is a deep experience? Quite regularly I have the opportunity to listen to the experiences of people who have had experiences in other places and environments and situations, with other teachers on courses and retreats. And one of those which I had, a woman came to me, and she said that her teacher, a teacher of non-duality, Advaita, as it is called here in India, and in that tradition, satsangs are held. Sat means truth, sang is like sangha, so the meetings of people interested in truth. In the group that she was in, she had some questions, and with those questions she came up to the front and she asked her teacher the questions. And with that, his response to that, he said to her, as she reported, along the lines, "You are not your body, you are not your mind, you are not your emotions there." Then she responded, then some other questions were she asked, and when the exchange came to its close, he said to her, "You're not your body, you're not your mind or your heart there, you are pure consciousness. You are pure consciousness. This is your true self." And she responded. She said that she was in tears. She was deeply touched by the words and the power of his words. She said, "I realized the truth of what he was telling me, and it really affected me deeply." And she said it was really the most important experience of her life. And afterwards, in meeting and talking with people, this situation took place here in India, there, but exchanged with others were appreciative of the exchange and of the confirmation of her experience, and this realization of pure consciousness as one's true self. The Advaita teacher said, "You are liberated. This is liberation. This is enlightenment there." And this stayed with her, she told me, for some days, weeks and months during the period of time that she was here in India. And then afterwards went back to her home city in the West. And then gradually, and these things happen humanly and understandably enough, a little voice of doubt began to creep in. And what contributed to this feeling and sense of doubt was that she felt she was beginning to lose contact with her true self, her pure consciousness, and some of the old habits and patterns which she wasn't experiencing in India began to emerge, and this was she told me, very, very uncomfortable for her, because she began to experience what she thought had finished, and what she said was beginning to experience a duality. This is my true self, and this is my old self. my old habits, my old patterns, my old divisions. And this became the struggle. And a difficult one, an existential one, a spiritual one. And as that struggle increased, she found it more difficult to get back to that experience with the Advaita teacher of the non-duality, in which this is your true self, true consciousness. And I think in these kind of circumstances and experiences, as I say, it's very common. It's not that it's rare. With all the sincerity and all the confirmation, that in this case from a teacher there, and all the sense of the truth of something for the person, that in a way, in the event which takes place, this means an exchange, a satsang, or a meditation retreat, or a course, or whatever it might be, it genuinely can be extraordinarily difficult, as with other things, to know how deep something is. Specifically spiritual, specifically deeply inside. And it's this a little bit this afternoon that I want to touch upon with you and explore with you. I'd just like to go to the past for a moment or two, and then to the present. And undoubtedly, a number of you have had a variety of experiences there, and some of these I'm talking about healthy, significant, beautiful, important experiences. These can take place in a variety of environments, and these environments could be, of course, on a retreat. They could be in nature, could be in the intimacy of a communication with another, could be found in a line of poetry, could happen could happen anywhere there, in which something occurs in the deep of the human being, which is clear and obvious and tangible there, and it really feels important. Sometimes these deep experiences in life really, not all of them, but really can serve as a real turning point in one's life. And, pardon me, a number of the aspects of this, one is, we might remember those experiences. It could be, let's just say, on a retreat, since it's the current environment, or in the nature, or wherever. And even though it's not deliberate and intentional, there could be a wish to re-experience the old experience. And so sometimes, teachers will say, well, that's past, it's gone, you're just clinging, you're just holding on to this old experience, whatever it might be, just let it go. Easier said than done. And so one's engaged in the meditations, dwelling, let us say, in the silence, and it just keeps arising. The arising of the old, which was valuable and important for you, doesn't mean to say that there is a desire to repeat. Generally speaking, when there is some repetition of an old experience landing in the present, it's a kind of messenger. It's calling on us, not always, but calling on us to look at it. That's why it's arising. Not in order to repeat it, but to use the words of the Buddha, to squeeze the honey out of it. And it might be necessary and quite important with an experience which is old, which is re-arising, and that could be last week, last month, decades ago, to recognize that experience, to acknowledge its arising, and the arising may be saying to you, there is more insight to be found here. There is more understanding to be found here. What does that need to be clear about? What is this old telling me which I didn't see at the time and I haven't seen subsequently there? With the power of the mindfulness, and it is a power, it's a great power in fact, and with enough power, with the silence and the equanimity, the directing of the mindfulness to the old experience, which is important for you, which you have a sense there is that honey to be squeezed out from it, that means more insight and understanding. The raising of the question requires from us enough inner quietude to stay steady, to listen deeply for the answer. And there is a way of knowing what the answer is or what the insight is. Sometimes we listen inwardly. We really have a specific situation that took place for us. And in the receptivity to that specific situation, a thought or an idea may come about it, or this is what it means, but we know it's a little bit theoretical. We know it's a bit abstract, or it might be, or a possibility. And if it is, that is what's coming up, it is not the quote-unquote answer. An answer genuinely has a feeling tone which resonates well, and it's really clear. If an insight or an understanding from the past arises, there is some genuine sense, it doesn't have to be big, but it's extremely clear, yes. There is an affirmation from the being, something more has been understood that wasn't understood, and one has no doubt about it. And one knows this is not theoretical, it's not an idea, it's not just a view and opinion. Whoa, ha, I see clearly. Ah, and one feels kind of better for that. The other, in relationship to the past and deeper experiences, and I do hope you are making time while you are here for some reflections on the past there. That's another contribution with regard to this, is you're looking at the past. Remember, the past is a storehouse of your life experiences, your memories, your living, and in that vast field of all that's happened in your life, there is a tremendous amount for insight and reflection and discovery which can inform your day-to-day life. It's not a matter of just being here and now as though that's some ultimate purpose. That's a very restricted and narrow view of our potential. So when we look to the past and we reflect there, another feature which is important with regard to this is in the looking there, and something touches us, it doesn't necessarily have to be for us a kind of strong experience. Quite often, of course, in this passion might be a polite word for addiction, in this passion for sensations, emotional, mental experiences, the wanting of a strong sensation. And plenty of times, in the past, that could be yesterday, the day before, or earlier, we may have strong experiences because of the strength of the feeling and the contact and the impact that it had on us. And we might even say to ourselves, or to our friends or teacher or whoever, this experience which I had was so important and so significant, it really changed my life. And there are such experiences, but such experiences, when they are deep, these experiences are not dependent on the strength of the feeling, emotional intensity or impact at that time. It is not the confirmation of a deep experience. It might seem at the time incredibly dramatic. It might appear at the time life-changing, and that may shake up there. I remember one of the people, one of the retreats, it made me smile. He said, "Christopher," he said, "I'm having an incredibly intense experience." He said, "My kundalini is rising up through my spine there, and all 6 chakras are spinning wildly, etc." I said, "Yes, and any insight?" Not much, I have to say. So sometimes there may be the strength of the experiences which are there, and that could be the turning point. And as I say, they can arise in a variety of ways, and I suppose because I'm out of the hippie culture that I have to make some reference to drugs as also for some people some turning point in their life. It's a fact, and I do apologize. So, not my personal interest, that area, but anyway. So with that, we know the change from the past to the present in which there is a deep experience, and one of the confirmations of the deep experience, whether it's intense and strong as I just described, or whether it's rather quiet, barely a thought, a short intention, the one confirmation of its authenticity in many cases is that it is a break with the past. That confirms something deep has occurred to you. It is a break with the unsatisfactory old. There is a change inside, and that break with the past gives the opportunity and the potential for something new. This deep experience sometimes, and this is the extraordinary thing of the human being, it may not be felt. It's not that we have to rely on feeling and emotion and something strong. We may not feel it, but it rapidly can change us. One of the examples of this can be listening to teachings. Person comes in, might be at the retreat, or course, or a workshop, or a public talk, or whatever the venue might be. The person just sits down and, to quote the Buddha, one lends an ear. See, very generous. Can leave one ear somewhere else, but just lend one ear to the words. And in the act of the listening there may not be any feeling, any emotion. There is no rush of, "Oh yes, absolutely, amazing, thank you," there. Nothing whatsoever is felt. One walks out of that hall, out of that environment, and one's life has been changed, and one cannot even remember what was said that changed it. All that one does know is one was in a hall, sitting to somebody, saying something useful. It resonated well with you, had no feeling about it. You walked out and think, I've got a new life. Something's happened. But I don't know what, but I do know something has sparked. So it can be strong and intense. It can be as soft and as light as a single thought, the deep, and sometimes neither strong nor weak. It's just, wow. Nothing in the sensory world to confirm it. But as I say, one aspect of this is that it is, and truth is liberating, that's its only function. It's not a construction of words. You can't find it in a book. You can't find it in a tradition, in a religion, in a set of beliefs. None of that is anything to do with truth. Truth has its function in the field of existence to free up. When there is a freeing up of the being, some truth has touched. Maybe with words, or maybe without. And so the truth liberates, the truth sets us free. With the change, we want to be receptive to this, especially when it's subtle. With the change that comes, sometimes it is a change of view. This is very important here. I hope the rest of it is as well. And it can be a change of view. And what I mean by that, the break from the past, one of the important breaks is the break from unhealthy, unsatisfactory, unnecessary, and unwanted habit patterns. This is a break. And with that unhealthy, unskillful, unwholesome habit patterns, we sometimes say to ourselves and to each other, gosh, I've got this habit inside of me, or this pattern inside of me, and it's really deep inside of me. The language, this experience, or this habit, which is really deep inside of me, is a naming of it in an unhelpful way. The very tendency to determine that something is deep inside of oneself exaggerates its importance. It makes it more of a problem by saying it's really, really deep. It makes it harder to work with because of the strength of the view, and one really believes it. And sometimes one has to remember, deep it might be. If we use that language, that naming form, I prefer not to, but if we use that. But one thing for sure, it's nowhere near as deep as liberation. It is nowhere near as deep as awakening. It's nowhere near as deep as the realization of truth. Deep it might be, but it's never that deep. It's not in the same class. But we, the self, the ego, the I and my, humanly enough, attribute something as very, very deep. If we can quietly, pardon me, not name it in that way, it might just give a little bit more space, a little bit more reactive, a little bit less reactivity about it, and then it can be, and this is one of the important aspects of the teachings here, you recognize it's a regular, frequent habit and pattern. One person may call it living in stress. Another person may call it anxiety. Another person may call it blaming of the other. Another person may call it constantly putting myself down. Another person may call it being really needy. Another person may call it just full of a lot of self-doubt, or being unhappy, or whatever. So we look at the condition of the being there. We recognize that this is a regular way of looking at myself, there, or looking at life, or a situation. And when it has that kind of repetition to it, and if we wish to make a break with the past, it may be really important to recognize this pattern, to name it, to be clear about it, and to say, this practice which I'm engaged in is going to give extra mindfulness, extra care, extra exploration of this pattern until this pattern no longer has any grip over my life. Quite often, and very, very understandably and easily, though the pattern is changing, that habit, whatever it might be about, when we're not under the influence of course we're grateful and we appreciate it and we have a feeling of relief. And which is important to recognize it cannot always be present. It is not possible. But it is also to recognize as well, in the times when it's not present, what ways can I explore this there? And if sometimes with certain patterns, if it's not being explored, you will know it by what you do. That's the most gross, subtle expression of it, what you do. The second, not far behind, is what you say. And the third is what you think. Giving any attention to any difficult pattern, which one really wants to see the emptiness of, to use the Buddha's teachings here, of it, we're going to take a real interest in it, and we're going to see how is that affecting what I do, how is it affecting the voice, what I say, how is it affecting the thoughts that I have. And if we really take each one of those, body, speech and mind, to use the Buddha's word here, we take each one of those, we can go much more subtle with it, so it might still influence the thought, but it's not going to speech. It might influence speech, but it's not going to what we do, bodily action there. And if we're really tracking in a subtle way, the thoughts, and after all, they are only thoughts, and if there is enough clarity, there will be enough clarity to be able to say, honestly and sincerely, a thought is just a thought. It is no more, it is no less, it is a thought, but it is just a thought. And that recognition that the thought is just a thought is the beginning of the end of that habit and pattern. One starts to know it's just a thought. I don't have to live in it. I don't have to believe in it. I don't have to speak from it. I don't have to act from it, because I've seen and know clearly a thought is just a thought. It never was anything more than that. It never will be anything more than that. And that knowing of that, then the weight, the history, the unhappiness, the depressions, and the blaming of the other or whatever, it starts to lose authority over your life. In the light of awareness or consciousness or mindfulness, of sharing of experience, of insight and understanding, no habit and pattern can last under it. We have a tremendous potential collectively and individually to really change, and of course in the public world we have an army of people, and including probably quite a few of you who are in here, to forms of service to help people come out of habits and patterns and unhappiness and difficulties in a whole variety of ways. And we need all of these skills that we have. with the present. Present, here and now, present as well. Questions fairly regularly get asked of myself and others here. And what I have in mind here, sometimes with the language, is these rather big words. Again, we have to be careful with the naming process. That in a, gosh, I'm going to have to use this word for a moment, forgive me, liberated way of life, free way of life, living with wisdom or whatever. It is important in the naming process to open, expand out the concepts there. Because when we don't, we set up the gap. And the gap is, here I am, this human being, doing my practices, passing through my daily life and exploring the path. There may be the naming of the goal. One says, I want a deep experience of that, I want to achieve that. And if some of the words, enlightenment being the big buzzword in these circles, liberation, nirvana, the true reality, non-self, the vast, the immeasurable, and so forth. If we keep using these words regularly, there is that which is so transcendent, it's so beyond, it's so far away. And here I am, this poor human being, still trying to find my nose on the second day of mindfulness of breathing, and I'm supposed to be able to reach that which is so far away. Not realizing that we have taken a concept, reified it, that means given it more self, given it such substance that it gets, the feeling inside ends up, oh, this is too big for me. How could I ever achieve such realizations or such experiences? And sometimes in some of the traditions, Buddhist tradition as well, we're given the concepts and they genuinely seem so far away, and then sometimes that is reinforced when teachers will say, oh, that experience, that realization, very, very, very few have this. It takes many lifetimes. You have to become a monk, which is a bit of a problem for half the population, and only then can you achieve, etc., like this. And then it becomes an elitist phenomena, a privileged phenomenon. It gets even further away. And when all of that happens, you get the monasteries and the temples and the flowers and the candles and the incense and all the devotion. And what is the devotion doing? It's reifying something ultimate and transcendent and keeping us in a childlike condition. That's what happens with religion. Instead of the spirit of liberation and inquiry and investigation and the passion to explore truth, that gets quietly forgotten. It becomes the untouchables and the unmentionables, and the outcome of that religion ends up in a devotional form. Tragic. Tragic it should end up like that. There's a place for devotion, but it's no substitute for a real waking up. There's a place for devotion, but the elevation of the other, the guru, the God, the cosmos, the universe, or whatever, and making the separation. These teachings and the traditions is the ending of that gap. not the reinforcement of it there. So somehow in the ending of that gap, the benefit of the deep experiences there, we have to spot, shall we say, and have the capacity just to notice the precious moments, that which touches us, which helps to illuminate the life. And here too, just in the quietness of the days, the meditations and the processes are a contribution towards a receptivity, and sometimes the transcendent is understood. One had a habit, one had a pattern, it's not been good for you, it's not been good for the other there, and one has a knowledge, a knowing and an understanding, this pattern has finished. And when that habit and pattern, whatever it might be about, has finished, one has transcended the problem of it. One has gone beyond the problem of it. And this teaching of going beyond is not into some other fancy realm, not into some special state, as it were, disconnected. It is a going beyond the issue of the problem or the habit which has been disturbing one, and one's finished with it, one's gone beyond it. Sometimes we look at a situation, from the flower to the beautiful presence of the other, to the day, to a deep experience. And initially, there is just the manifestation of the experience. There is just the image there. There is just the simple actuality of what you and I might look at. And of course, it's common to us. You may say, oh, hello, how are you? Look at this, oh, what's happening here, etc. But deep experience is the quiet, calm commitment to see deeper than what initially appears, to go beyond its appearance, to go beyond its presentation. And we need some silences and some stillnesses and some presence to see if something can come out of whatever it may be, something can emerge out of it which I've never seen before. So one's gone beyond its normal presentation, looked more carefully and deeply, and something else has emerged out of it. And that which emerges out of it, from a line of poetry to a single conversation, to a reflection of squeezing the honey out, to an interesting experience, that which emerges out of something, that which we look at, whatever it is, which is a confirmation of the infinite, that which we look at, which is a confirmation of the infinite, has, this is important, infinite potential to realize, to enable us to see an infinite number of insights and expressions just by looking at one thing. We live in this. No wonder that some of the sages have said, we don't have to go outside our front door to realize an infinite number of insights and discoveries. So we keep our receptivity, so we say, really alive to these explorations there. And if you find, and have found, that some of the naming, some of the words which are used are helpful, use them. If you have a sense and the feeling that they're making too big a gap, where you are, where you think you would like to be or should be, then let go of them. Don't bother with these words. So if words like Buddha, Dharma, enlightenment, reality, the unconditioned, the unmade, the unformed, the unhelpful, or whatever it might be. If you just find those words a bit, all that about, and it is confusing, drop them. No point in being attached to a word if it's getting in the way. So then that keeps the spirit of things alive. It may be, in the deeper experience, at some point in time, a word feels appropriate, whatever the word. And sometimes people will say, thank you for this retreat, Christopher. Though the word G-O-D was not mentioned at all, but I want to thank you because I have found God. And when the teachings and the explorations there, sometimes we will wonder, and I think it's important this, how can we know, if we can, the depth of experience of another, whoever she or he may be, and the insights of another there. And with that, essentially, there are two criteria here, two important factors. If a person has some depth of realization, insights and understanding, it has an enduring value to it. It stays steady there. And the steadiness of that is such that such a person is not besieged with doubt. There may be, for her or for him, some issues and areas of life which need a lot of attention and working with, etc. And one of the ways that this enduring understanding of the other takes place, and there are two ways, and they're fairly simple, extremely pragmatic, and sometimes we need to remind ourselves of this. One is, you have to know the person for a long time. One hears sometimes in these kind of circles, the spiritual circles, the religious circles, you may go to a meeting and the teacher, the guru, the master, the acharya, whoever, speaks well and clearly and illuminatingly, so forth. And one can easily say, oh, I've just been in the presence of a real master. She or he is clearly an enlightened human being, etc. You can't possibly base it, such a view, on a single meeting or a single retreat there. One is just seeing the current presentation there. So one criteria is that you know a person for a long time. You know him or her through a variety of situations there. And the second criteria, which is also important, is how does the person handle a very difficult situation? This tests the mettle there. It's rather easy in situations of comfortableness, no major challenge, whether it's with regard to oneself, heart, mind, body, with regard to support, handling, dealing with threatening situations, crisis situations for another, and many other circumstances. So if truth is touched, there is a certain freedom from the oppression, shall we call it, of the past, and therefore more freedom of the being there. If possible, to ensure that you know her or him for a good length of time, and when there is a really challenging and difficult situation, how's the mettle of the person to be able to handle that situation, whatever that might be about there. And I think that gives us, all of us really, a realistic sense of human contact and communication and recognition of truth and the freedom of the human being there. So do listen finally to those, to the deep of the being. It may come in a strong feeling tone there. It may come in a very small whisper, hardly noticed. It may come just out of a reflection, squeezing the honey out, and it may come through some action. And this we are deeply interested in, and it's the remarkable and wonderful potential we have as human beings to share a life together, a sense of being awake with this world, awake with this life, meeting it fully, and to meet it fully, less impact of the old habits and patterns will be an immense contribution. Let's have our quiet minute together, shall we?